Ladies and gentlemen, good morning. Welcome to the Council of the Americas. In many cases, I see welcome back to the Council of the Americas. We're very pleased to have each of you, and we're especially pleased as well for all of you who are watching on webcast. We welcome you virtually to the Council of the Americas here in Washington. We are very pleased to have the opportunity this morning to host a conversation with the administrator of the U.S. Small Business Administration, Maria Contreras-Sweet, as well as the Mexican ambassador to the United States, Eduardo Medina Mora, both of whom I think you will find to be not just knowledgeable, obviously, but certainly well worth listening to in the context of putting some very complicated ideas into a framework that is from the day-to-day private sector, the ability to move forward on some of these very complicated issues. So we are delighted to have both of them with us. 2 decades after the North American Free Trade Agreement entered into force, dramatic changes in the global economy have led to radically changed regional economic models, including here in North America. No longer do Canada, the United States, and Mexico merely trade together, but now we design and actually make products together. Our economies are integrated to the point where made in North America is now the norm. This reality matters for small business suppliers and larger companies alike. And let's not forget, it wasn't so long ago that companies like Facebook and Twitter and even Microsoft were small enterprises. As many of you know, the Council of the Americas has a long history of engagement in promoting a more economically integrated North America. It's a core value of our institution. In 2012, our latest initiative, we established the North American Border and Competitiveness Leadership Initiative, which is a public-private dialogue on reducing constraints on intra-regional trade. Most recently, the Council has played a leading role in the context of the U.S.-Mexico High-Level Economic Dialogue, which both the United States and Mexico launched last year, and we continue to lead efforts to provide private sector input to U.S. and Mexican cabinet officials on actionable ideas for the two governments to improve binational economic growth and development. We also welcome the senior level attention that Mexico has received from Washington in recent months, and it's very clear that the Obama administration sees Mexico as a key partner, both in U.S. economic growth and development, and also in terms of regional partnership in the Western Hemisphere. Today, as I mentioned, we're very pleased to be hosting 2 leaders who are furthering the U.S.-Mexico relationship and have been greatly invested personally and also in their current circumstances in supporting North American competitiveness. I have the joy this morning to introduce one of them, the Ambassador of Mexico, Eduardo Medina Mora, whom I mentioned, who will then introduce our keynote speaker, Ms. Contreras-Sweet, and then after she makes some brief comments, then we will have a dialogue at the dais. Ambassador Medina Mora has been in Washington for almost 2 years, and he's established a reputation as an effective representative and interlocutor for the Peña Nieto government. He boasts a truly outstanding record in public service, including appointments prior to his current one as Ambassador of Mexico to the United Kingdom, Attorney General, Secretary for Public Security, and negotiator of the Merida Initiative. But he also has deep experience in the private sector, and this is oftentimes what's glossed over when he's introduced in Washington, but for our purposes, this is an equally important aspect of the ambassador's very impressive biography. He was Corporate Director of Strategic Planning and Deputy Director General of the Desk Group, a large Mexican conglomerate in the fields of automotive parts, petrochemicals, agribusiness, and real estate. He also coordinated the advisory team, the legal advisory team to the Mexican government during the NAFTA negotiations. So he has, as I mentioned, direct experience in both government and the private sector. In addition, he's a dear personal friend of the Council, and we're very grateful for his friendship as we continue to strengthen our bilateral relationship. Ladies and gentlemen, to get us started this morning, would you please join me in welcoming to the podium the Ambassador of Mexico, Ambassador Eduardo Medina Mora.
Thank you very much to all of you. I'm delighted to be here. Thank you, Eric, and thank you to the Council for having us this morning. I'm eager to engage in an interesting discussion about the vast potential of North America as a competitive region with a person that is leading the efforts to strengthen small and medium-sized enterprises in the United States. It is my great privilege to introduce Maria Contreras-Sweet, the 24th Administrator of the U.S. Small Business Administrator. Maria was born in the beautiful city of Guadalajara, Mexico, and before coming to Washington, she developed a successful career both in the private sector and in government in California. Maria founded the first Latino-formed commercial bank in California in more than 35 years. As the bank executive chairwoman, she focused on providing access to capital and counseling the small and medium-sized businesses in LA. She previously started a venture capital firm that invested in small businesses. In addition, Maria has served on the Federal Glass Ceiling Commission, created to help break down barriers between women and the executive suite, and founded Hispanas Organized for Political Equality, HOPE, a non-partisan advocacy organization dedicated to encouraging Latinas to engage more fully in the democratic process. In the public sector, Maria was the first Latina to hold a state cabinet position in California. As Secretary of Business, Transportation, and Housing, she managed 13 departments, including Caltrans, the California Highway Patrol, the Department of Motor Vehicle, and the Department of Financial Institutions. She managed a very large budget and a fantastic, awesome, very large workforce as well. I have met with Maria several times since she entered President Obama's cabinet on April 2014 to deepen our working relationship with the Small Business Administration and to bring this agency closer to the Mexican consular network in the United States. I can attest that Maria is already as successful an administrator as she has been an entrepreneur, business, and state cabinet official. Maria, you are one of my favorite persons in government, and I also consider you a personal friend. I have learned a lot from you, and you really represent and portray what the Mexican-American population means for the United States and for us all together. Please join me in welcoming Administrator Maria Contreras-Sweet.
Thank you. That's so very nice. That's very kind. Thank you so much. I appreciate that. It's very nice. Very nice. Thank you. What a generous introduction. That was very, very kind. Thank you so much. Usually I say, I wish my husband were here. You know, his name is Ray Sweet, and so he likes to say he made me sweet. But thank you so much, Ambassador, very much for that, again, very generous introduction. And I'm delighted to be here today to talk about the growing role that small businesses play in our trade relationship with Mexico. Let me start by acknowledging the Americas Society, the Council of the Americas, and the indispensable role that you play in thought leadership and how you have helped to strengthen and expand North American commerce. Thank you so much for that extraordinary role. I'm delighted to have this chance to be here with Ambassador Eduardo Medina Mora to discuss the key role that small businesses are playing in the North American supply chain. The ambassador has been a strong, ardent voice for Mexico and the North America community, and particularly in promoting commerce. It's a personal honor for me to be with you here today. Indeed, as he mentioned, I was born in Guadalajara, Jalisco. I came here as a family of migrant workers, and I'm proud to be here today as a member of the President's Cabinet. I'm also grateful for the opportunities I've had to realize the American dream since immigrating to the United States. The Council of Americas has worked so hard to make meaningful contributions that redounds to all three NAFTA signatories. Today, Mexico is the second largest trade partner to the U.S., behind Canada, and millions of American jobs have been created thanks to the cross-border synergies that we've developed, from manufacturing skills training to cluster partnerships to entrepreneurial support networks and trade missions. All have helped to push those numbers forward. Our trading relationship with Mexico is one that's increasingly based on shared values. President Obama is committed to a trade strategy that includes lowering tariffs, trade barriers for American entrepreneurs. Since NAFTA was ratified, now 20 years ago, Our nation's trade with Mexico has quadrupled, more than $1 billion worth of commerce each and every day. It's remarkable to know and to consider that American exports to Mexico now exceed exports to all of the BRIC countries combined. And it is greater, according in our conversations I've learned, that our trade now with Mexico is greater than Japan and China combined. 6 million American jobs are supported by our trading relationship with Mexico. Just as importantly, this relationship is good for our southern neighbors. Mexico has embarked on a path of economic and democratic reform that has created new pathways for its citizens to join the middle class. Indeed, the SBA has enjoyed being a strong advocate for the Trans-Pacific Partnership. TPP would add key new elements that uphold our basic labor and environmental standards so we can honor the dignity of workers and our responsibility to the planet. TPP recognizes that our economic partnership with Mexico is critical to the health of American small businesses, who are the backbone of many North American supply chains. I've made supporting supply chain growth a tenet of my term at the SBA. The president tasked me with 3 things. He said, run an effective SBA, be a voice for America's small business, and take small businesses to the next level. So I've reframed the way we think about the SBA. It now stands for smart, bold, and accessible. We have to be sensitive to the technological advancements that are taking place in society to make sure that SBA remains relevant. So to that end, we're evaluating and studying all of the smart systems that we can deploy, not just internally at the SBA, but how we communicate to our partners out in the community, as well as how we help entrepreneurs deploy smart systems to make sure that they're competitive and continuing to grow the economy here domestically and abroad. We want to make sure that we're being bolder, and bolder means market making. How can we make sure that the SBA is exploring all of the new markets and advancing small businesses in that regard? We're evaluating all of the programs that we can deploy to make sure that they're optimizing their opportunities with the government, which is the largest procurer in the world, the U.S. government, with the corporate community, as well as international commerce. To that end, I was so pleased to be standing at the president's side to announce a new program called Supplier Pay. Supplier Pay is it's a concomitant to the program that the president had already announced some time back. You may recall that he announced a program that we call Quick Pay, where we now pay small businesses that do business with the federal government in 15 days. And I can tell you, having been a businesswoman 3 times over, my last initiative having been to start a bank, that when somebody stretches you out 120 days, 90 days, it's painful and it's difficult to get a credit line based on receivables, asset-based lending. And so when I heard that the president launched this initiative, Quick Pay, to pay in 15 days, it was quite remarkable. The president and I just recently added Supplier Pay, which says, for those corporations that are also doing business with the federal government and commit to paying their small business supply chain in 15 days, we will pay them in 15 days. And so each day we're enrolling more and more corporations who are leading the pack in this regard. And accessible, I said SBA, Smart Systems, Bolder Actions for Market Making, and A stands for accessible. We want to make sure that the SBA is reaching all people who are interested in our support. And so we want to make sure that we're responding to the vets who are coming home, to our seniors who are now encore entrepreneurs. I keep telling my husband that the new 40 is 60. Yeah, I haven't convinced him yet, but I'm working on it. But truly, we are now much more vital, and we want to make sure that we're putting our seniors to work who have a passion after they've worked so loyally to their corporation or wherever they were working in a nonprofit or for government. They now want to sort of fulfill their own passion, and they're vital, and so we want to enrich those lives. We also want to be mindful of all of the Native Americans, the African Americans, the Hispanic Americans, and Asian Americans who populate the beauty of the United States, to make sure that this SBA is being responsive to them. So anyway, so I'm delighted that all of these programs are working and they're taking hold, and particularly the supplier pay program is making access to affordable working capital the single greatest, addressing the single greatest challenge faced by America's small suppliers. Because when you have to wait 120 days to get paid, that's 4 months without revenue to compete and fulfill new contracts and grow payroll. I know that our Mexican partners have also taken major steps to invest in their supply chains, from infrastructure investment to workforce training to new export promotion programs. I'm proud that our countries are creating new synergies to help our small businesses win foreign contracts. One of the most important partners that SBA has is our national network of small business development centers. These are hundreds, literally hundreds of SBDCs, we call them, Small Business Development Centers, in cities across the nation. They provide free advice, compliments of Uncle Sam, and training to help entrepreneurs make sound business decisions. This advice runs the gamut, everything from technical, financial assistance, to regulatory compliance, to matchmaking and export counseling. In recognition of this transformative power of the SBDCs, President Obama launched the Small Business Network of the Americas. It's a project dedicated to helping small businesses access new markets by linking up American entrepreneurs with foreign buyers and vice versa. Recently, I had a chance to lead the presidential delegation to El Salvador at the installation of Sanchez Seren, and I was able to see firsthand how this international network is taking hold, to meet with women who are doing business with women here today, and how both sides were benefiting from it. It was quite a delight to see that kind of activity taking place, and to see all of those. And I know that the ambassador today has seen similar success stories taking place in Mexico. We are also committed to our STEP program, which provides federal funds to help America's small business owners attend foreign trade shows and go on foreign trade missions. There's no substitute for face-to-face contact and relationship building with our prospective business partners. We have a strong network of USEACs, we call them U.S. Export Assistance Centers, which we jointly operate with our sister agency, the Department of Commerce and the Ex-Im Bank. We have more than 100 centers across the country, staffed with experts to provide that frontline outreach. They work with companies that are new to exporting, as well as more experienced companies that want to expand that footprint into additional foreign markets. This is an exciting time to be at the SBA. I can't tell you how pleased I am to see that we're supporting the companies that create today 2 out of 3 net new jobs, and small businesses also employ over half of the private workforce. So I'm looking forward to the discussion today and to deepening our relationship as we empower entrepreneurs in both countries to succeed in international commerce. Let me just close with something that John Kerry shared. He said that not so long ago, naysayers doubted that the growth of democracy in Mexico and elsewhere across the Americas would translate into better lives for the people who live there. But the story of modern-day Mexico proves that democracy and economic stability are partners. He went on to say that when he travels to regions of the world struggling with modernity and skeptical of democracy, he tells them to look to the Americas as proof positive of the progress that is possible. I couldn't agree more. We are both experiencing unparalleled social mobility, and my story is just that. When I did leave my beautiful Mexico, and my grandmother would say, but work hard and bring others along. And someday, mija, my daughter, someday you might be able to work in an office and be a secretary. The good Lord heard her prayers and allowed me to hold office and to be a cabinet secretary. And I'm so delighted that her good prayers were answered. But we must promote the replication of those stories over and over and over for the well-being of both our nations. Thank you so much for allowing me to be with you. Thank you.
Ambassador, let's have you here. Thank you. were fabulous comments. Thank you.
Thank you.
Really,
Thank
really interesting, and as I promised, not just substantive, but enjoyable as well. So thank you to you both for starting us off so well. Administrator, let me pick up on something you mentioned in your comments. You referred to the trade agenda and you referred to the TPP, the Trans-Pacific Partnership. Council of the Americas has been a strong supporter of TPP. We were strong advocates for both Mexico and Canada being included in the negotiations. One of the things that you hear sometimes from people who are not as sold on the trade agenda as perhaps the Council of the Americas is that the trade agenda is for big business. The trade agenda is for the big guys, folks who kind of, can figure out trade, but it's the small and medium-sized enterprises that don't have a lot in that agenda, and frankly, that it can be sometimes counterproductive for the SMEs. Obviously, you have a different view. Tell us a little bit about that, and then, Ambassador, I'd like to get your views on the same question, please. How are you working to ensure that the SMEs get full advantage out of the President's trade agenda?
Thank you. I think that's an excellent question. Today we have technology that's lowered the threshold, and so we can now do international commerce. Indeed, if you have a website up, you're already engaging in international commerce. And so what I find is, I mentioned through our SBDC network, that there's a vast opportunity for us to engage and participate in that. In the next decade, we're going to see 1 billion new middle-class consumers join commerce. And today, out of all of our small businesses, only 5% are partaking of international commerce. And yet we've learned that as soon as a small business engages in international commerce, their revenues grow by 40%. So there's no question that over and over and over, we see the quality of the engagement to be advantageous to the small business community. And it's a great, vast new marketplace, and technology allows for it.
Mm-hmm. And Ambassador, from your perspective on the other side of the border, if you want to put it that way, I know you're here in Washington now, but in the context of Mexican enterprises, do you see the same phenomena? Do you see the same scenario?
Actually, when you have an economy in this region so effectively integrated, you see that even if you only serve the domestic market, you are competing internationally. It is true that as big, as large as it is our trade relationship with the U.S., $508 billion a year last year. The administrator mentioned the $1 billion a day figure. I will mention the $1 million a minute figure, which is slightly higher. It's growing, but most of this trade is carried out by around 200 companies. There are many small and medium-sized businesses engaged in the value-added chain, but not a lot of them. And this is what portrays Mexico today and our challenges, which is we have a highly effective, modern economy that is engaged internationally, and we have a large portion of the economy that provides most of the employment that is lagged behind. And the challenge is how to engage these two and link these two segments of the economy together to profit from productivity gains and economic growth. And from this, the opportunities that we are seeing is precisely this modern economy, export-led, very well integrated with the U.S., to integrate the small and medium-sized enterprises. President Peña Nieto's agenda reform that has been really comprehensive in many senses is essentially focused on lowering transaction costs and lowering barriers of entrance. And this is critical, what Maria Contreras and the SBA have done in the US, we are now doing in Mexico. Actually, the SBA has a very strong engagement now with the Instituto del Emprendedor in Mexico, their counterparts, to actually adopt best practices, and from there trying to move these small and medium-sized enterprises that actually are those who will provide most of the jobs and where our opportunities in terms of productivity gains are higher. TPP will complement and enhance NAFTA. We are not engaging together. We are engaging really as one, because it is not that we trade a lot, we produce together to compete here in our regional market, North America, and abroad, the Asia-Pacific region. We are already doing that, so we have to move forward from that basis.
And I want to follow up on that with a question about an idea that we hear a lot about, but I don't think many people actually know what it is. The word is innovation, right? People talk about innovation. We need more innovation, et cetera, et cetera. Innovation drives economies. The president of Mexico, as well as the president of the United States, have both spoken eloquently about innovation. But I wonder, Ambassador, and then I'll come to you, Administrator, about in the context of the trade agenda, but also the context of SMEs, and 2 out of every 3 jobs being created in the United States are being driven by the SME community. What does that say in terms of the innovation agenda with Mexico? I mean, that has clearly been a priority of your government. And give us a sense of how you're looking at some of these issues and how the SME community plays into that.
It has 2 sides. One is, of course, what modern businesses are introducing in terms of new products and new services and new processes. But also, and more importantly, is the small entrepreneurs that are actually innovating in nature. They are creative, they innovate a lot, and they work hard. They don't have a choice, otherwise they cannot compete. Mm-hmm. So the most important incentive to innovation is the opportunities that you identify, and then you grow from them. This is also important to actually drive this through government policies that actually support this in terms of skills and also in terms of opportunities, lowering barriers of entrance, in terms of finding new ways to do all things, or new ways to build and provide new services and new products. In this sense, bilaterally, we have developed what we call the FOBESI, which is a forum that focuses in education, innovation, and entrepreneurship. This is the critical part, I would say, that will drive growth from our already very engaged bilateral relationship. I think that the best practices that the SBA has developed and the new approach that Maria Contreras is driving into the organization is being very closely shared with us in terms of having the same policies adapted in our country to foster innovation, creativity, and of course growth, which is at the end what matters.
Administrator, where does innovation rank on your agenda?
Yeah, well, as I mentioned, I reframed the SBA to include smart systems. And I mean it at every level, as I said, because that's the way we create the most qualitative growth effect on our population, right, on our economy. And so to that end, how do we use technology to be that kind of stimulant? And so we've done a couple of things. One is we have what we call the SBIR program that innovates. And so the SBA takes a percentage of every other department's research fund and directs it to small businesses to spur innovation. And I'm really pleased to say that today we see the vast amount of innovation coming out of small businesses. It's really quite remarkable. So you have, for example, the Mars rover Curiosity right now that's flying over was a couple of small business research recipients that were able to deploy this technology. We see the advances that we're making in Ebola cures right now out of San Diego, or an SBIR grant that the SBA directed. And so over and over and over, I see that this is taking place. Moreover, as I said, when you think about the corporate community, to your earlier question, when you think about the corporate community, to allow them nimbleness to respond to the changes that are taking place in technology, in commerce, small businesses are a key strategy to that element. And so you have to have an effective, capable, and efficient supply chain to be competitive, whether you're a large business or a government. You need to have suppliers that are going to be responsive to today's needs, and it allows you to respond to the market swings. So small businesses are key in that regard, and as I said, they're key and they're leading the way in innovation, which I think is remarkable. And so what we're trying to do to be relevant and to be responsive is to promote the SBIR grants. To me, it behaves like angel financing, but it's even qualitatively better because we don't take an equity position in this. So we control the largest equity fund in America and we don't take an equity position. Imagine that.
Can I sign up?
Right? These are SBI research grants. And then we have a accompanying program that we call STTR when you're in partnership with the college, with the university. And we're working very collegially with Commerce to make sure that speed to market is everything. So we want to make sure that we get these patents established as quickly as possible. So I'm really studying the continuum of entrepreneurship to make sure that at every intersection the SBA is there to add value. So when you're just contemplating building your business plan, you can go to, as I mentioned earlier, the SBDCs throughout, or the VBOCs, our Veterans Business Outreach Centers, or our CDCs, wherever, to get the counseling, or our 68 district offices. It's an important network. Then if you're saying, I'm ready to start doing business, but I don't have the capital, you can look into this BIR contracts. And then after that, then you say, now I'm ready to start, but I just need a little bit of capital. I've doubled down on micro-lending. So I reached out to the credit union community to say, here we have a ready-made network of micro-lenders that need to be redeployed in a more aggressive fashion. They're already capable of underwriting, and they're already in every community. So we're entering and in the throes of drafting an MOU, and they've agreed, and we're very enthusiastic about this extended network. And then our traditional products, the 7A and the 504, and then at the other end, we have the SBIC, the Small Business Investment Companies that provide mezzanine and private equity and more favorable terms in a more patient capital atmosphere.
Mm-hmm. So innovation isn't just the companies, it's also with the agency that you head as well. So congratulations, that's a very, very thoughtful response. When we talk about supply chains, we assume smoothness, we assume connectivity, we try to get inefficiencies out of the system, and we oftentimes think about private sector to private sector, but there is a major stumbling block between our two countries. It's called the border. We've heard a lot about the border recently over the last couple of years. Council of the Americas has done a lot of work on the border and also about the border. So Administrator, I want to ask you, because small businesses and SME community sometimes don't have the same resources to address obstacles as they present themselves, as you've just been talking about. And we recognize the importance of the border, and we recognize the security issues inherent in border affairs. But can you talk to us a little bit about some of the things you're doing and working perhaps within the administration to try to reduce the border as an obstacle to the SME community and more broadly the business community?
Yes, I think over time the border will become less and less of an issue, except for the actual logistics movement, right, which is really critical. And to somebody who was California Secretary of Transportation and worked along the border, that was really key, and we worked to smooth that out, and I think we're making some progress in that regard. But again, I'm just going to speak to the fact that we now have technological facilities, and I'm just going to talk to you about the commercials that we see out there. If Amazon actually gets to the drones, we'll be able to deliver goods in new ways. And so I think that as time goes on, I think we're going to find new ways to do commerce. When my son started up his law firm, it was dramatically different than when my brother-in-law did. You used to have an office, the annotated code books. You had to go through a remarkable process to be able to do law. And when my son, although now he has the office and the books, but when he started, he just said, I can do a search on LexisNexis. I can just dictate on my smartphone. And so I think that the way we do business now is dramatically different and efficient, which is really remarkable. And so it remains critical, but I think that these other ways in which we will engage in commerce will facilitate the continued growth of both countries.
Mm-hmm. Ambassador, the border has been a real issue for you and your government as well, for obvious reasons, and we've engaged with you and your team as well. Talk to us a little bit about, from the Mexican side, how you view it and some of the opportunities there, frankly.
Well, first of all, the border is an issue, and it's not from safety and security, but mostly from logistics and the cost of actually crossing the border with goods and services. A good friend of mine who worked in this administration as Assistant Secretary of Commerce, that actually was born very close to the border, said once, and I always like to quote him, that we have a 21st century trade on top of a 20th century regulatory framework, on top of a 19th century infrastructure. We are opening the first rail crossing between Mexico and the US in 100 years as we speak. So we have improved, but still the cost of crossing the border is very high. We are competitive with that. Imagine what we could do if we actually take that cost really down. So it is easier for businesses that build up critical mass. If you move volumes, you can deal with that because you can find ways to actually design your logistical approach in a smarter way. When you deal with the small volumes, it's much more difficult. So technology and, of course, new approaches is what is key here to really take those costs down. In the bilateral level, in the high-level economic dialogue, the border is a central topic. We have developed the idea of developing strategic corridors. You cannot build infrastructure and staffing and systems and technology in the 52 border crossing points. You can build state-of-the-art, very effective, fully staffed 24/7, 7 or 8 corridors where most of the volume will come and then take the cost down. And also engage in partnering small businesses with large businesses in the logistical approach to actually reach the market. One of the issues is that from the topic we were discussing previously, it makes sense for big business, for large companies, to engage with small businesses and take their costs down. The way to approach things will, of course, improve in terms of quality and will improve in terms of lowering your cost. And in that sense, you will be much more competitive in reaching the markets.
I just wanted to add, because I think that was a very thoughtful answer, that having been California's Secretary of Transportation, I saw the role the states can play. And I think it's a really important one because states, the federal government funds, it's the federal gas tax and there's a whole formula around that. But at the end of the day, the states have a large say in how they can amplify efficiencies or slow it down. And so in California, we tried to do everything that we could to expand it. California, we enjoyed having the first and second most important ports in the country. And so it was important for us as a border state to make sure that we were optimizing our efficiencies. And to that end, for example, we had a collegial relationship in trying to support Mexico in expanding its Tijuana airport for the benefit of the San Diego region. And I think that we have to look at those issues more broadly and more openly. And again, the way the global entry programs that we put in place to make sure that the trucks were going in and out. And the way we thought about it was, what is that corridor? How do we work with UP and BNSF to make sure that we're allowing for the movement, the ease of movement between the states? And so I also challenge the states to be thoughtful and forward-looking in this regard.
And you point to a critical piece of the puzzle. We think in Washington and Mexico City, we think at the federal level, but the states, and in fact sometimes at the even sub-state level, cities, communities, counties have a critical role to play on the border. Actually, sometimes that's what makes it so complicated. There are so many entities with an important voice and important things to say. So just coordinating all of those can be a challenge sometimes. Well, we have a short period of time to engage with all of you to the extent that you might have questions. Regrettably, we don't have a huge amount of time. The administrator has a fairly tight agenda, as does the ambassador. But if there are a couple questions, we can entertain those. We'll take one in the back. Let's take 2 or perhaps 3 if there are in a group, and then we'll ask the speakers to respond. If you could identify
Good morning.
yourself,
My name is Kyle Bayless, and I'm a director at the University of Maryland Small Business Development Center.
Thank you.
And we have been very much engaged in the SBNA program. In fact, we have sent some of our consultants to El Salvador to help do an evaluation on their programs that they're trying to create in that country. And then we also just recently hosted a fellow from the State Department from El Salvador for 2 weeks for him to learn best practices and see how we actually do counseling for businesses. We also, I keep going on, but I manage an organization called the Hispanic Business Center, where we provide one-on-one business counseling and language to Latinos in the Washington D.C. area. We've been doing it for 7 years. We have incredible results, and one of the things we find is those first generations and those second generations still have a lot of important ties back in their countries that they actually help establish trade relationships, and I think that's one of our focus right now. One of our sister centers in San Antonio, the University of Texas at San Antonio, is very much engaged with Mexico, and they also participated in this program. Now for my question. One of the things that we are finding is some of the resistance of how do we do outreach to some of these countries. Really, our mission is domestic, but trade helps that domestic stimulation of the economy here in Maryland, D.C., wherever, Virginia, but there are some barriers that we have to overcome. Some are financial. We need money to actually do this outreach and to try to train these people and to travel to these countries, and we are in partnership with the State Department, USAID, but they have restrictions on how they can spend their money. So that's one of the issues we run into. The second one is just the protocol of the SBA. What we have to go through in order just to get permission to do outreach or to travel to those countries. I mean, I'd like to see that, reduce the friction of that and open it up a little bit more.
Thank you. And is there another question? We have the time to entertain. Let's go down here to the front row. If you could identify yourself, please.
Thank you. My name is Rubén Barrero with the Mexican News Agency. I would like to pose this question to Ambassador Medina Mora. Going back to the border, you talk about the next opening of a new railroad line between Mexico and the United States. And I wonder if you can expand a little bit more about this issue, because I spent 3 weeks at the border, and specifically in Laredo. And one of the issues is, for me, the questions being some kind of native border people is, what is the challenge for Mexico and the United States? It's just the lack of infrastructure, because when I was at the border, I hear that we need more bridges, and certainly maybe the pace of how these bridges have been built in the last year is not fast enough. But when you open new bridges, you still see long lines of trucks coming in from Mexico to the United States. And lately, I've been surprised to see long lines of people trying to cross, legally, of course, from Mexico to the United States. So, I wonder if you can give us a sense of, what is the real challenge in this issue, and what countries are doing in this regard.
Ruben, thank you for that question. And then there was one in the back, and we'll take that one, and then we'll ask the panelists to respond, please.
Good morning. My name is Alex Honja. I'm a graduate student at Georgetown University. Thank you both for your wonderful, insightful comments this morning. My question is for the ambassador. Now that some of the most impactful and challenging reforms from Enrique Peña Nieto's reform agenda have now been passed, what do you think full implementation of these reforms is going to look like? Thank you.
Now, what Alex didn't say is he used to be an intern at the Council of the Americas. So in fact,
So thoughtful.
it's proof that people can make good after being with the council. Administrator, to you, please, for the first question, I think. Yeah.
I think it's an important question, and we're testing different programs in different sites. For example, San Antonio, our SBDC in San Antonio is doing a remarkable job in reaching out and doing what they need to do to expand opportunity between Mexico and the U.S. And so we're taking some of those best practices to see how we can roll them out. I don't know if you've had the opportunity to review what we're doing in San Antonio, but the SBDC there with our district office and our USIAC program have a very nice program in place. So we need to understand what those ingredients are to make sure that we're replicating them. So I'd be happy to have an offline conversation with you to learn what those impediments are in your region to see what we can do to open it up for you.
San Antonio program. So they do have some good practices. Things we should try.
Thank you.
Mr. Ambassador.
Thank you. First of all, in terms of the border, It has to be a smart approach. We have the 21st Century Border Initiative. And this is combining all the elements that actually drive cost and impede trade to happen smoothly. This is infrastructure, of course, but it has to be planned in a smart way. As I said, not in every single border crossing point. We have to pick those that actually can improve in terms of volumes. You have to pay for the infrastructure, and the only way to do that is to increase your critical mass from volumes. You have to staff better. We have a very strong staffing problem. Maybe the most important problem in terms of the border is staffing, because they have limited operating hours, and if you have a number of lanes, not all the lanes are actually active when they are most needed. So we have to find ways to have more staff and to pay for that staff. I think that the government staff provides value, and in that way, it has been open for the states and private businesses to actually pay for that staffing, and that makes sense. And also to have smarter approaches in terms of technology, because it can help, pre-clearance, pre-certification, to know more about who is crossing and what is crossing. This is the Global Entry Program, and also the Nexus, and also the pre-clearance program is actually designed from the basis that you manage risk from understanding what is coming, who is sending that, and in that sense, you can manage that in a much smarter approach. Finally, to use the infrastructure better. As I said earlier to both of you, with President Peña and the governor of California, we were discussing the idea of making, for instance, lanes reversible. Those lanes are pretty stressed coming north at certain times, most of the times, but there are also times in which they are stressed going south. So if we can do as we do in roads and bridges, to actually have more lines coming one way than the other, it makes sense. This is an infrastructure that was built by either of our countries for the benefit of our countries and our economies, and we can actually do that with a much lower investment, certainly improving from technology and a much smarter approach. The reforms are really transformative. This is a very bold reform agenda that has been waiting for many years. Now, it has been possible, first of all, from a very innovative approach in politics. It should be politics 101, but it is not. It's a combination of leadership and vision and the ability to work with your political opponents to find common grounds and then compromise. And we have been able to actually pass a very transformative agenda in many fields of the economy, competition, antitrust, telecommunications, energy, labor reform, that will really trigger productivity, innovation, and growth. At the end, this is about growth. I think, of course, that the challenge is in implementing these reforms. The energy reform is moving much faster than anticipated. The round 0 is completed. Round 1 is already anticipated. So the market and the players already know what to expect. The regulatory bodies that are autonomous in nature have already been established, and the members have been appointed by the Senate. So we can move forward very rapidly. In that sense, this will transform Mexico from lowering transaction costs and lowering barriers of entrance, to put it very simply, and from that, triggering growth. And this is something that will actually be growing together with the US and Canada. This is a North American equation. And the future, I am positive, in terms of the most competitive economic area in the world, is not in Asia, as much as Asia fascinates us all. It's in North America, and it's us.
Well, that's a terrific point to end on, and I completely agree with the analysis. I would say that as all three economies continue to work together and innovate and become more productive, certainly including Mexico. That's going to put even more pressure, though, on some of the border activities and even more requirement for us collectively to get it right, because you're going to have even more cross-border traffic and trade and investment, which is a good thing.
Right, but I just wanted to add, because I think the ambassador is spot on to your point. It is so critical that we optimize, and I keep referring to technology, but when you see the way vehicles are working today, and this is what I'm referring to, now we have to have so many car lengths between one vehicle and another in a highway. And when the technology that's being deployed by the automobile industry almost creates a platoon effect, so that they can ride much more efficiently and closer together without heed to an accident. So I think that's going to help us run those highways more efficiently. The other is what we call a demand management on a highway system, so that you can say during peak travel periods, you're going to pay a higher toll to use this highway, and you can manage it that way. And then, as the ambassador pointed out, that we if you have 10 lanes, 5 in each way, what you can do in the morning is the egress is going in one direction, is to say 3 will go this way, and the others are going to open up to to come inward, and then you reverse it when the demand changes. And so I think we do have to use these technological evolutionary products to make our transportation more effective, and I see that taking place, and so I'm heartened by those opportunities. But to the ambassador's point, you don't want the regulatory construct to get in the way of the technological gains that we're making.
Absolutely. I would love to continue this conversation. We've just gotten started, it seems to me, and yet schedules intervene. This being Washington, everybody has a full agenda, so we do have to cut it here. But before we do, let me just thank Kezia McKeag for her leadership on this initiative. What a fabulous job she did to put this program together. Let me thank the staffs of both of you. They were terrific to work with, very, very helpful, and in working together to pull this together, so that always makes our lives a lot easier. But let me particularly thank the people of Mexico and the people of California for sending to Washington their very best. I mean, you honor us by coming to Washington and leading these efforts, and we're very mindful of that. Ladies and gentlemen, would you please join me in thanking our speakers for their terrific contributions?
Thank you.